Alright people, welcome. Gonna do a little video. It's going to be guerrilla style, opinion piece, off the cuff, ramblings, mistakes, you name it, but it's going to be in this video. I wanted to do a bit of a discussion on this Yakuza discourse that I saw on Twitter, because so far from what I've seen, everyone is losing their minds, and everyone tends to lose their minds occasionally when there's a new piece of news or information revealed in social media. And it was revealed that they are taking RPG elements to a whole new degree. The new Yakuza game is going to be turn-based and is going to be a mainline entry. Originally, Yakuza 7 was called Shin Yakuza. And Shin Yakuza was going to be a spin-off to the series featuring this protagonist called Ichiban. I think Kiryu's story is all wrapped up with Yakuza 6. So now they are taking this game, this concept, this April Fool's concept at first, because the gameplay was going to be supposedly an April Fool's joke with the Yakuza being turn-based. They took all this stuff and they are implementing it into a mainline entry. With Yakuza 7 is fully turn-based. Just a disclaimer before we continue, because I'm sure Yakuza fans are finding that to be weird. I think the production team did say that if this gameplay model fails, they will be going back to old school Yakuza gameplay if Yakuza 7 does not pan out. So there is a silver lining presented right there in the middle of the floor for old school fans of the gameplay. First and foremost, I am a bit of a vanilla fan with Yakuza. I only really played a couple of entries like Yakuza 3, 4, 5. I played Kiwami and Yakuza 0, and I still have yet to play Yakuza Kiwami 2 on my PC. I think the series is fantastic. A nice little beat 'em up affair. A nice little beat 'em up that has RPG elements as well. Like you can upgrade your characters, get different moves, do differing attacks. But the gameplay was front and center with that beat 'em up life. Now they're changing everything dramatically, and they're calling Yakuza 7 a mainline entry. And the real question of today is, should they change a franchise completely from a gameplay perspective and expect people to like it? As a developer, you have to expect this answer to be very divisive. You're going to have a crowd that enjoys the old school gameplay no matter what, regardless, right? They could be purists, they could be anybody. They're going to enjoy what they played in the past, and they're going to want it to stay that way for all eternity. They don't want change, they don't want any alteration. They just want that same old school gameplay that they come to know and love and respect in the franchise. Okay, fair enough, right? Okay. Then you're going to have another crowd. Let's dub them as Crowd B. Crowd B, they don't mind change. This crowd is susceptible to any sort of change or alteration, for better or for worse. And then you have Crowd C, and those people are indifferent. They don't mind change. They just want it to be somewhat similar to the old formula, and they still want a good game regardless. And I fall in line with Crowd C on this topic. I don't mind change, but there has to be just a little bit of a disclaimer. I don't mind change unless it actually brings something new, fun, and engaging to the table. You're shifting genres here from beat 'em up to turn-based RPG. I expect all the bells and whistles from an RPG, and also some of the elements that made Yakuza good in the first place. That's what I want. That's what I need. And on top of that, I need a fun and engaging game on top of this if you're going to make a dramatic change to mainline. Let's go back to Group A. Group A is the radical people who want old school gameplay and nothing else. This side, they do have an argument. The argument is, we want old gameplay. We don't care about anything else. They have an argument with, if the wheel isn't broken, then don't fix it. What does that mean? If it works as intended, then why not expand that gameplay instead of altering it? This is something I solely believe. This is something that I believe franchises should not do. They should not change dramatically, without the random exception, of course, because there is always exception to the rule. But they should not change dramatically if something isn't broken. If something works, if something could be enhanced, because it brings back that familiarity with the old school gameplay that people came to love, appreciate, and adore, right? So if you're going to make this hybrid of old gameplay and new gameplay, it needs to stick out like a sore thumb without regressing, without losing anything important to the formula. If you lose something in the process before you decide to change the gameplay, if you regress, lose elements in the process that were actually fun and engaging, and you don't implement them in your new game, then you have failed. If you don't take the elements from the new genre and work on them and reinvigorate them to your knowledge, then you have failed. You have to stick all the right notes on the table. The game has to be fun. The game has to have some level of skill. The game has to harken back to what made the franchise so good in the first place if you're going to change a gameplay perspective. There are exceptions to the fucking rule here, people. I said this before. Resident Evil 2 Remake, everyone was loving that game, praising that game, and I feel like it's still a survival horror game thematically. No matter what anyone says, I believe that Resident Evil, it needed that gameplay update from a fixed camera perspective. That is something that does not adhere to the if it ain't broke, don't fix it rule. Why is that? Because something was obviously broken in translation as we move on to more modern adjustments. Resident Evil got better as we got to Resident Evil 4 from a gameplay perspective. Wow, just wow, I can actually see my enemies. My camera is not obscuring my vision. There's no more of this gimmicky nonsense like fixed camera and tank controls. Now you have to make the scares more intense, more reinvigorating, and they did just that for Resident Evil 2 Remake. The enemies are more up close, up personal, in your face, and it really works just fine for the gameplay readjustment. Not everything is perfect, but something needed to be fixed along the way. Fixed camera is a thing of the past. It is antiquated, just like tank controls. And I wouldn't have it any other way with a game that plays better, looks better, sounds better, and feels better. That's what you should strive for if the gameplay ultimately gets stale. And in some franchises, it can. If your mainline entries start to suck, then yeah, maybe you should change something along the way. If it doesn't, then just keep building on top of the gameplay and making it better. Devil May Cry did not need to change. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So they decided to enhance the experience a little bit more with limited co-op. They decided to enhance the experience a little bit more with new tools like SDT. You see, once you get to that point, then you have to really think about the other side. Now, for the people just wanting change and all this stuff, is change always good? No, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, it's not. Just look at the new God of War versus the older ones. Guess what? And this is another video I want to kind of talk about, but I'm just going to use this small example. The old God of War had cool gameplay. It was flashy, over the top, gory, etc. All of that got sacrificed for a cinematic presentation, of walking through the woods, of looking through everything with this beautiful scope of a third-person camera angle, then discovering that Kratos has a hard time seeing things behind him because the FOV is so bad. And a hack and slash game, no less, where Fast and Furious action really matters. That's not to say that, all third-person action games or character action games are bad, but for God of War, it should have stayed top-down. Honestly, some people complain about God of War Ascension, but I digress. The old gameplay was fire, and I will talk about that in another video. But you get the idea. When you regress, when you go 2 steps backward, when you take things out of the equation for change, it ends up being worse than I imagined. Even the little things, like I didn't think Devil May Cry needed to change for the reboot, so why is this unnecessary reboot here in between DMC4 to DMC5? It's not needed because it's not as good as the previous game. That game shipped as a hack and slash that catered to 30 FPS and not 60. And even DMC4 on old hardware like the PS3 and the Xbox 360, it could do 60 FPS. That's a fucking travesty. Alright? That really is. When you have things like, even small things like Uncharted 4, taking away the grenade throwback from Uncharted 3. Uncharted 4 got glaring reviews. Honestly, it's a great game on top of every singular merit. I like the rope mechanic to compensate for the lack of grenade throwback. So there is a silver lining there as well, but still, I can't throw back grenades. A guy is lobbing 6 grenades back at me and I can't do shit outside of get on my rope and go. It's like I lost something in the process. I don't like regressive material. Now, there's also some debate going on, and people are saying that, yeah, okay, if this was a side game, if it wasn't Yakuza 7, if it didn't have that connotation behind its name, it would be great. Because who cares about side games and mainline entries if they are separate? They are their own thing. We have our expectations from mainline entries in the series 1 through 7 through 11, 10, 15, Final Fantasy 20, whatever the fuck. And then we have the side games. It's very apparent on the basis of side content that you can experiment with whatever the fuck you want and you will not face that big of a repercussion unless that game is bad. So you have Jackaxe, you have kart racers, you have chess, you have RPGs, you have other games diverging from the formula, you have non-canon stories like Operation Raccoon City, you have Umbrella Corps, Umbrella Shitty, right? Because that game was MLG nonsense that went nowhere. Even then, it's a side game, so you could choose not to really give a damn about it. If you don't care about it, it's not a mainline entry. They're not changing something so drastic to the point where it's readily noticed by the people who enjoy the old style gameplay. As I said, exceptions to the rule because a lot of people liked Resident Evil 7. That went into first person, which is not the first time we've seen something like that, but it's the first time we've seen a mainline game go into first person. The side games had plenty of it, and that mostly got received well. So I do think that if a game was side content, if it really didn't matter to the overarching storyline or the overarching gameplay, then it could be wrote off. It just feels like those side games do not alienate people who enjoyed the main series. I don't think many people can complain if you jump from Metal Gear Solid to Metal Gear Rising because it's like, cool, okay, here's this hack and slash they experimented with. I don't like it that much. Let me go back to the older Metal Gear Solid games. It's not really a big deal. There are times where change is needed. If the wheel is obviously broken, stabbed, shot, and beaten to death, right? This is why game franchises are rebooted, remade, all this shit. They take all these elements into consideration before shoving it out there yet again. I do think there is preemptive squabbling about Yakuza 7 being a bad game just because it's turn-based. I think that logic is dumb, honestly, and that just all equates to the purist mindset. It's like, okay, you don't like it, I get it, right? For all the reasons I explained in this video, I understand where those people are coming from. I also understand that if the game is not out, if it's not in your hands, then I think you're just unfairly judging it. Just a thought, right? So I see the entire argument from both sides. All sides, actually. It's multiple sides to this. At the same time, I think people should not be judging the game if they haven't played it themselves. That's A. B, I think we need to understand if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And then there's C, where it's like if a franchise changes for the better, then that's okay, right? We can see where things go in the future if they decide to keep things fresh. And then there's D, if a franchise doesn't change for the better when swapping subgenres, then I believe wholeheartedly that they need to go back to the drawing board and figure out what works and what doesn't. And as the guy said on the team, if this doesn't work out, we're going back to old style Yakuza gameplay. So I believe there is nothing to worry about in the grand scheme of things. Let them experiment, and if it doesn't work, then they'll eat crow and they have to go back to what was known. That's how I feel about this entire subject. Hopefully you guys really did like this video. I obviously almost went for 20 minutes again, but I wanted to really get my points and illustrations out there on this. Should a franchise change things? Sometimes yes. Sometimes you do need to change the archaic things in a franchise if things are too far gone. Is change always good? No, not really, because you end up with shit like the new God of War and the DMC reboot, and sometimes you can regress a couple of steps backward, and that might not be too kosher. I don't like losing things in the process when it comes to good gameplay. Should you judge preemptively on a game if you're a purist and you have a purist mindset and you don't want things to change for the better? No, you shouldn't, because the game is not out yet. So you're judging way too prematurely. It could be to a certain benefit of the series, and it could be something worthwhile. It could be something worth playing, so I wouldn't write things off that I haven't played. Should old gameplay be kept if it wasn't broken in the first place and you don't need to fix it? Yes, I do. I do believe that too. I believe if you can enhance that gameplay in some fashion, you should do it. And changing like in mid-genre to something that wasn't broken in the first place, that can be very, very confusing. Very confusing if it's not a side title. I don't know, man. Like, I see all sides of this. I don't think that one side is always inherently wrong, but there's ways to go about it. There's ways to make hybrid gameplay from the new, from the old, doing new things, and it could turn out to be successful. Or you could do many regressive things and it turns out to be a failure. We don't know yet until these games come out. I'm just hoping the best for the Yakuza team, and hopefully they go forward and make a kick-ass game, even if it's in a completely different subgenre. Like I said, Final Fantasy has changed, and a lot of people like that so far. There are a few people out there saying that they prefer turn-based combat, but the majority likes the action for the new Final Fantasy, and that's being positively received. My only big problem is that that game is going to be kind of butchered because you're not getting the full experience. You're not getting all of the stages and levels from disc 2 to disc 3, but I digress, right? Like, bigger problems come up when you think about this more and more. And hopefully Yakuza team does this right and they live up to their words, and they do utilize that silver lining if all things go awry. Otherwise, people, maybe the basic notion and the moral of the story is if you stick to side games, you won't get a lot of heat, but if you decide to change mainline tradition, then you better be ready to step up your A game. Anyway, this is Renegade Operative signing off. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this opinion piece on if a franchise should change or should not change. I don't know what I'm going to necessarily call this video, but I'm gonna find something interesting to call it that's going to be point blank, on the nose, and tell you exactly what I'm talking about. Once again, if you enjoyed this video, please slap a like on it. Let me know in the comments below, what do you guys think of a franchise changing their gameplay formula in a mainline entry for better or for worse? Sound off. Let me know how you feel about Yakuza 7. Let me know how you feel about the subject in general, and I will catch you guys next time. Once again, share the video too. That helps me a lot, and I will see you guys later.